My name is Denise Evans, qualifying broker with Butler Evans Real Estate Inc., and this video is about tenant estoppel letters. A little bit about me. I am an active commercial real estate broker and consultant. Call me for buyer or seller brokerage needs you might have, referrals, or co-brokerage opportunities if you have a deal that's maybe a little bit beyond your experience or your comfort level. I'm happy to co-broke and assist you with that deal. I am a retired litigation attorney who specialized in real estate and banking defensive litigation, a former clinical professor of real estate at the University of Alabama Culverhouse College of Business, and a nationally published author from McGraw-Hill, Sphinx Legal, and Kaplan Dearborn. What is a tenant estoppel letter? Basically, it's a letter from the tenants for a property that's being sold, and the letter confirms that all of the basic assumptions that the buyer has made about the economics of the property are in fact correct according to the tenant's perspective. The contract requires the seller to deliver letters signed by all of the tenants, confirming all of the buyer's basic assumptions according to the leases and other documentation that has been provided by the landlord to the seller. In other words, the tenant's saying, everything the landlord told you about me and my lease is correct. Tenant estoppel letters should be part of every commercial investment real estate purchase contract. The letters should include confirmation that the attached lease, each letter should have that tenant's lease attached to it, plus any amendments or extensions. Confirmation that the attached lease is true and correct. There have been no amendments unless also disclosed, and no verbal agreements that differ from the documents. The amount of the monthly rent and any scheduled increases. Yes, that will be in the lease, but a lot of tenants will sign saying that the attached lease is true and correct and never even read it. So this is just an additional, a fail-safe to make sure that the rent is really what you've been told that the rent is. The amount of the security deposit. There is no prepaid rent except for the current month. Would it not be really dreadful to buy a property that has a single tenant with a 5-year lease and 4 years remaining on the lease, and you buy the property based on that only to discover after closing that the seller made the tenant a sweetheart deal that if it would prepay all of its rent for the entire 5 years, it would get a deep discount. So in other words, after you buy the property, there will be no rent coming in for the next 4 years. That the rent has been paid through the month of whatever and the year, so you know that the tenant is current on its rent or it's not current. There are no unresolved grievances or disputes with seller, and if there are grievances or disputes, you should ask what they are. You should leave up a space for that. No repairs needed in the lease premises. Leave a space if repairs are needed. You need to know that. And the tenant has not given notice of non-renewal. I negotiated a purchase of an office building one time for one of my clients, and the third floor tenant had been there for 18 years, renewed the lease every 3 years, every expectation they would stay there. Lease expired about 5 months after closing was due to take place. That tenant had already given notice that it was not going to renew its lease. So it was a good thing we found out about this in the tenant estoppel letters because we canceled that contract. It changed all the numbers. When do you get them? Usually the seller wants to give them to you as late as possible, because if there's some reason the deal is not going to close because of things discovered during the inspection period, the seller doesn't want to get the tenants all riled up signing these tenant estoppel letters and nothing happens. So usually the tenant signed estoppel letters are obtained no earlier than 15 days before closing and no later than 3 days before closing. It is a good practice to prepare all of those letters and submit them to the seller during the due diligence period for the seller to confirm all that information, and then get the tenant to sign off later. The purchase contract should contain a clause that says if the tenant estoppel letters vary from the information provided by the seller landlord in its due diligence material, closing can be extended for 15 days or however much you want to negotiate. And if the variance cannot be resolved to buyer's satisfaction in its sole discretion, the contract can be canceled with full refund of the earnest money, even though that happens outside of the due diligence period, the inspection period. Well, I hope you found that useful. If you have some follow-up questions or any other questions at all, please contact me, Denise at butlerevansrealestate.com, or call me at 205-310-3799 Central Time Zone.